The millionaire's baby wouldn't stop screaming on the plane, and every passenger was staring with judgment when a quiet black woman sitting beside him made an offer so shocking that the entire cabin fell silent. But what started as an unexpected act of compassion would soon turn into something far more dangerous. When Maya noticed a suspicious man in the back clutching a bag that moved in ways no luggage should, and she had to make a choice between staying invisible or risking everything to save a life she wasn't sure anyone would believe was in danger. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The fluorescent lights of Gate 47 flickered slightly as passengers shuffled toward the jet bridge, dragging suitcases and juggling coffee cups. It was barely 6 in the morning, and the international terminal buzzed with that particular exhaustion that comes from waking up before dawn. Most travelers wore the glazed expression of people who hadn't quite finished their first cup of coffee yet. Maya Thompson moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her small messenger bag slung across her shoulder. She was dressed simply, a comfortable navy sweater and jeans, but there was something graceful about the way she carried herself. At 28, she had learned to navigate airports with minimal fuss. No oversized luggage, no frantic searching for boarding passes, just quiet efficiency. The flight attendant at the door greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, welcome aboard." "Morning," Maya replied softly, returning the smile. She made her way down the narrow aisle, scanning the seat numbers above each row. Her boarding pass indicated seat 18E, middle section, aisle seat. Not perfect, but manageable for a long flight. She settled into her seat, tucking her bag beneath the seat in front of her. The plane was still boarding, passengers bumping past with their oversized carry-ons and duty-free shopping bags. Maya pulled out her phone, checking messages she'd already read twice. It was just something to do with her hands. That's when she heard the murmuring. "Is that him?" a woman whispered to her husband 2 rows back. "Has to be. I saw him on the cover of Tech Weekly last month." Maya glanced up, curiosity getting the better of her. A man was making his way down the aisle, and he stood out immediately, not because he was particularly tall or flashy, but because of what he was carrying. A designer baby carrier strapped to his chest, the kind that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Ethan Ward looked every bit the successful tech entrepreneur the whispering passengers clearly recognized him to be. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and despite the expensive watch on his wrist and the perfectly tailored jacket, there was something harried about him. His jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the seat numbers with an intensity that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The baby in the carrier, a tiny thing with wispy brown hair, squirmed against his chest. Ethan's hand came up automatically to support the small head, but the gesture seemed mechanical rather than natural. "That's Ethan Ward," someone else whispered. "The guy who sold that app for like $200 million. Where's his wife? I heard she left him. Took off right after the baby was born." "No way. Who leaves a newborn?" The gossip rippled through the nearby rows like wildfire. Maya tried not to listen, but it was impossible in the confined space. She focused on her phone screen, pretending to be absorbed in something important. Ethan reached row 18 and paused, checking his boarding pass against the numbers overhead. His eyes landed on seat 18D, right next to Maya. She felt a small flutter of disappointment. She'd been hoping the seat would stay empty, giving her extra room to stretch out during the flight. But she kept her expression neutral, offering a polite nod as Ethan maneuvered himself into the window seat. It wasn't an easy process. The baby carrier made everything awkward, and Ethan had to twist sideways to avoid bumping the infant's head against the overhead compartment. A flight attendant rushed over to help with his bag, her expression professionally cheerful, but her eyes full of concern. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Ward? Water? A blanket for the baby?" "I'm fine." Ethan said curtly, not making eye contact. "We're fine." The attendant hesitated, clearly wanting to offer more assistance, but Ethan's tone didn't invite conversation. She nodded and moved away, leaving him to wrestle with the carrier's straps. Maya watched from the corner of her eye as he finally freed himself from the carrier and settled the baby. Oliver, she'd heard someone say, into the car seat that had been pre-installed in the middle seat. The baby was tiny, maybe 4 months old at most, with round cheeks and impossibly small fingers that kept reaching for his father's hand. Ethan buckled the car seat with fumbling fingers. It took him 3 tries to get the belt through the correct slot. When he finally succeeded, he slumped back in his seat and closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. The baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, just a whimper of protest. Ethan's eyes snapped open. His hand immediately went to the car seat, rocking it slightly. "Shh, we're okay. We're okay." But Oliver wasn't convinced. The whimper grew louder, more insistent. Ethan unclipped his seatbelt and leaned over, checking the diaper, adjusting the blanket, trying everything at once. His movements were jerky, uncertain. The actions of someone who hadn't quite figured out this whole parenting thing yet. Maya turned her attention to the window across the aisle, giving them privacy. But she could feel the tension radiating from the seat next to her. It was palpable, like static electricity before a storm. The plane continued boarding. More passengers filed past, some glancing curiously at the baby, others rolling their eyes preemptively. A businessman in an expensive suit took the seat directly behind them and immediately pulled out his laptop. A college-aged kid with bright blue headphones settled across the aisle, already lost in whatever was playing on his phone. The flight attendants made their rounds, checking seatbelts and overhead compartments. One of them, a cheerful woman in her 40s named Janet, according to her name tag, stopped by Ethan's row. "Is this your first flight with a baby?" she asked kindly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "No, we've flown before." It was clearly a lie. Janet seemed to recognize it too, but she just smiled. "Well, if you need anything at all, just press the call button. We're here to help." "Thank you," Ethan muttered, though his tone suggested he wanted the exact opposite of help. He wanted to be left alone. The plane door sealed shut with a heavy thunk. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing their flight time to London. 8 hours and 40 minutes. Maya saw Ethan's shoulders tense at the announcement. The engines rumbled to life. The plane began its slow taxi toward the runway, bumping slightly over the uneven tarmac. And that's when Oliver really started crying. It began as a whimper, then escalated quickly into a full-throated wail. The sound was piercing in the enclosed space, sharp enough to make several passengers wince. Ethan immediately reached for a bottle he'd tucked into the seat pocket, but his hands were shaking as he tried to angle it toward Oliver's mouth. The baby turned his head away, refusing it. "Come on," Ethan whispered urgently. "Please. You liked this bottle an hour ago." But Oliver's cries only grew louder, his little fists clenched, his face turning red with the effort of screaming. Ethan tried rocking the car seat, making shushing sounds, patting the baby's chest. Nothing worked. The businessman behind them groaned audibly. "Oh, this is going to be a fun flight." A woman across the aisle shot Ethan a look of pure irritation before jamming earplugs into her ears. The college kid turned up his music so loud that Maya could hear the bass from where she sat. Ethan's face flushed. He unbuckled the car seat and lifted Oliver into his arms, standing awkwardly in the cramped space between seats. He bounced the baby gently, trying to soothe him. But Oliver was inconsolable now. The crying intensified, becoming almost frantic. "Sir, we're about to take off," a flight attendant said, approaching with a strained smile. "You'll need to remain seated with the baby secured." "I'm trying to calm him down," Ethan said through gritted teeth. I understand, but safety regulations. I know the regulations, Ethan snapped. Give me a minute. The attendant's smile tightened, but she stepped back. The crying continued, piercing and relentless. Maya tried to focus on her own thoughts, but it was impossible to ignore. She found herself watching the baby, noting the way his tiny body trembled with each sob, the way his fists opened and closed rhythmically. She recognized those signs. She'd seen them 1,000 times before, back when she used to work in neonatal care. The baby wasn't just upset. He was overstimulated and probably hungry. Ethan managed to get Oliver back into the car seat just as the plane reached the runway. The engines roared and they began to accelerate. The force pushed everyone back into their seats. Oliver's cries reached a fever pitch, competing with the engine noise. An elderly man in the row ahead turned around, his expression thunderous. Some people shouldn't travel with babies if they can't keep them quiet. Ethan's face went from red to white. He didn't respond, just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight Maya could see the muscle jumping. The plane lifted off, climbing steeply. The change in pressure made Oliver scream even harder. His little face was soaked with tears, his mouth open in that particular expression of infant misery that could break anyone's heart. Maya's fingers tightened on the armrest. She told herself to stay out of it. This wasn't her business. Ethan clearly didn't want help from strangers. She'd learned the hard way that offering unsolicited advice about babies was a quick way to offend people. But watching Oliver cry like that, watching him struggle while his father grew more panicked and helpless, was physically painful for her. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Ethan immediately unbuckled Oliver again, lifting him and trying the bottle once more. Oliver batted it away, his cries never stopping. "Please," Ethan whispered, and Maya heard the desperation in his voice. "Please, buddy. I don't know what else to do." Maya leaned slightly to the right, catching a better view of the baby. Oliver's fists were clenched tight, his legs pulled up slightly. Classic signs of hunger in an infant. His cry had that specific rhythm and tone that she'd heard hundreds of times in the NICU. She ran her fingers along the strap of her messenger bag, debating. Her mind flashed back to another baby, another set of cries that she'd tried so desperately to soothe. Isaiah. Her son. The ache in her chest that came with that memory was still razor-sharp, even after 3 years. Oliver's cries softened for just a moment, and in that brief pause he turned his head slightly toward Maya. Their eyes met, his wide and tear-filled, hers soft with understanding. For 2 seconds, he stopped screaming entirely. Ethan noticed. He followed his son's gaze and found Maya looking at Oliver with an expression of deep compassion. Something about her look made him bristle defensively. He'd seen that look before. From his mother, from his assistant, from the nanny he'd tried to hire who quit after 1 day. It was pity mixed with judgment. "Don't look at me like that," he said sharply. Maya's eyes shifted to him, her expression unchanged. "I wasn't," she said calmly. "I was looking at your baby." The words hung in the air between them. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Oliver started crying again, the moment broken. The cabin seemed to grow quieter around them, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The next 10 minutes were excruciating for everyone in the immediate vicinity. Oliver's cries hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd gotten worse. The sound echoed through the cabin, and Maya could see passengers several rows away craning their necks to locate the source of the noise. Ethan tried everything. He walked up and down the narrow aisle with Oliver pressed against his shoulder. He tried the bottle again, and again, and again. He checked the diaper 3 times. He adjusted the baby's clothing, wondering if he was too hot or too cold. Nothing worked. Maya watched this unfold with growing concern. Not concern for the passengers, though their irritation was palpable, but concern for Oliver. The baby's cries were becoming hoarse. He was wearing himself out, and that kind of exhaustion could be dangerous for such a young infant. She bit her lip, warring with herself. Finally, as Ethan passed her seat for the fourth time, she spoke. "Excuse me." Ethan stopped, turning toward her with wild, desperate eyes. Up close, she could see the dark circles beneath them, the stubble on his jaw that suggested he hadn't slept properly in days. Maybe weeks. "Do you mind if I try?" Maya asked gently. The question seemed to short-circuit something in Ethan's brain. He stared at her, uncomprehending. "What?" "With your baby. Do you mind if I try to help?" For a moment, Ethan just stood there, frozen. Then his expression hardened into something defensive and almost offended. "I don't think that's appropriate." Around them, nearby passengers turned to watch this exchange. The businessman leaned forward in his seat, curious. The college kid pulled off one headphone. Even the flight attendants, who'd been huddled near the galley discussing something, paused to observe. Maya kept her voice calm and steady. "I worked in neonatal care for 5 years. I'm also a certified lactation consultant." She pulled a card from her messenger bag and held it up, her credentials still current even though she hadn't worked in the field for 3 years. The information seemed to stun Ethan and several of the passengers who'd been listening. The woman across the aisle, who'd been glaring at both of them, suddenly looked intrigued. The businessman's expression shifted from annoyance to interest. But Ethan still hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I can handle my own son." Oliver's cries reached a new pitch, almost frantic now. His little body was rigid with distress, his face blotchy and red. Sweat beaded on Ethan's temples. He bounced Oliver desperately, but the movement seemed to make things worse. "I don't know what else to do," he muttered, more to himself than to Maya. Maya stood up, moving into the aisle so she was facing him directly. She was several inches shorter than Ethan, but something about her presence commanded attention. Her voice was quiet but firm. "He's hungry. I know that cry. It's not gas, it's not discomfort. He needs to eat." "I've tried the bottle," Ethan said, frustration bleeding into his tone. "He won't take it." "Sometimes babies refuse bottles when they're this distressed," Maya explained. "The sucking reflex gets disrupted by crying." Ethan stared at her, then at his screaming son. Maya could see the moment he started to crack, the walls of pride and self-sufficiency beginning to crumble under the weight of his own helplessness. Maya took a breath, knowing what she was about to say would shock him, would shock everyone. But she also knew it might be the only thing that would help Oliver right now. "If you're comfortable with it," she said quietly, leaning closer so only Ethan could hear. "I can nurse him, just until he calms down." The entire surrounding area went silent. The businessman's jaw actually dropped. The college kid's eyes went wide. The woman across the aisle gasped, not with offense but with surprise. Ethan's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been horror. He stammered, "No, I mean, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," Maya said simply. "I'm offering." A young woman in the row behind them leaned forward and whispered loudly to her companion. "Is she serious? Can she even do that?" An older woman with silver hair, seated across the aisle, spoke up unexpectedly. "That used to be normal, you know. Wet nurses, community feeding. Before formula, women helped each other this way. She's offering kindness." But another passenger muttered, "There have to be health regulations against that." Ethan looked down at Oliver, whose cries had become desperate, almost panicked. The baby's little hand stretched out, flailing in the air, and in that moment, something in Ethan broke. "If you're sure," he whispered, his voice barely audible over Oliver's screams. Maya nodded. She gestured to her seat. "Sit next to the window. I'll take the middle seat." They rearranged themselves awkwardly in the cramped space. Ethan settled by the window, and Maya took the middle seat that had held Oliver's car seat. She pulled a soft shawl from her bag, she always carried one, and draped it strategically over her shoulder. "Hand him to me," she said quietly. Ethan hesitated one more moment, then carefully transferred Oliver into Maya's arms. The baby squirmed, still crying, but Maya's hands were practiced and gentle. She positioned him carefully, murmuring soft reassurances in a voice too low for the other passengers to hear. "Shh, little one. It's okay. You're safe. I've got you." Beneath the shawl, she guided Oliver into position. For a few seconds, he continued to cry, confused and overwhelmed. But then instinct took over. He latched on, and within heartbeats the cabin was flooded with silence. The change was so abrupt that several passengers actually gasped. Oliver's tiny fists, which had been clenched tight with distress, slowly relaxed. His body went from rigid to soft, melting into Maya's arms. The only sound from him now was the gentle, rhythmic sucking of a hungry infant finally being fed. Maya kept her eyes down, focused entirely on the baby, but she could feel the weight of dozens of stares. Ethan sat frozen next to her, his mouth slightly open, his eyes locked on his son. "He's never settled that fast," he whispered. There was awe in his voice, but also something like grief. Maya didn't respond immediately. She just continued to hold Oliver, one hand supporting his head, the other resting gently on his back. She could feel his rapid heartbeat gradually slowing, feel the tension draining from his little body. Around them, the cabin remained eerily quiet. Some passengers had returned to their books or phones, but many were still watching, their expressions ranging from curiosity to approval, to lingering discomfort. The strict flight attendant who'd tried to get Ethan to control Oliver earlier approached slowly, her expression uncertain. She opened her mouth to say something, but the older woman with silver hair spoke first. "Leave them be," the older woman said firmly. "That woman just gave everyone on this plane peace and quiet. Anyone who has a problem with how she did it can take it up with me." The flight attendant hesitated, then nodded and walked away. Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward the stranger, but she kept her focus on Oliver. The baby's eyes were starting to drift closed, his body completely relaxed now. She could feel the weight of him in her arms, so achingly familiar, and yet so different from the last time she'd held a baby this way. "Thank you," Ethan said suddenly, his voice rough. "I don't know what else to say except, thank you." Maya glanced at him briefly, then returned her attention to Oliver. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." "Still," Ethan insisted. I've never seen him calm down like that. Not with me, not with anyone." There was something vulnerable in his admission, something that made Maya's heart ache. She could hear the unspoken question beneath his words. Why won't he do that for me? "Babies can sense stress," she said softly. "If you're anxious, they feel it, and it amplifies their own anxiety. It's not your fault." Ethan absorbed this in silence. He watched his son, now peaceful and content in a stranger's arms, and something complicated crossed his face. Oliver's sucking slowed, then stopped. He'd fallen asleep, his tiny mouth going slack, his breathing deep and even. Maya held him for a few more minutes just to be sure he was truly settled, then carefully adjusted the shawl and looked at Ethan. "Do you want to put him back in the car seat?" Ethan nodded, but when he reached for Oliver, the baby stirred and made a small sound of protest. Maya shifted, allowing Ethan to take his son, but Oliver's face scrunched up, threatening to cry again. "Maybe let him sleep on you for a bit," Maya suggested. "He'll probably wake up if you move him right now." So they sat there, the three of them in an odd configuration. Ethan pressed against the window, Maya in the middle, and Oliver stretched between them, his head resting on Maya's chest while his legs draped over Ethan's lap. It should have been awkward. It should have felt strange and uncomfortable. But somehow it didn't. The plane cruised through the sky. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as passengers settled in for the long flight, and in row 18, two strangers and a baby created a small island of peace amid the chaos. Ethan found himself stealing glances at Maya, questions forming in his mind. Who was this woman who'd appeared out of nowhere and saved his sanity? Why would someone offer to do something so intimate for a complete stranger's child? And why did watching her hold Oliver make his chest tighten with something he couldn't quite name? Maya, for her part, tried not to think too hard about what she'd just done. Tried not to acknowledge the way holding this baby had cracked open something inside her that she'd worked very hard to seal shut. Tried not to remember another baby, another time, when all her training and expertise hadn't been enough. Oliver slept on, oblivious to the complicated emotions swirling around him, content in the simple knowledge that he was safe, fed, and warm. And for now, that was enough. Oliver remained peaceful in Maya's arms, his breathing soft and rhythmic. The cabin had settled into the quiet hum of a long flight, passengers reading, watching movies, or sleeping with neck pillows wedged against windows. For the first time since boarding, Ethan felt like he could actually breathe. He watched his son's sleeping face, then glanced at Maya. She was staring out the window across the cabin, her expression distant and unreadable. But there was something about the way she held Oliver, so naturally, so perfectly, that made Ethan's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. "He's never settled that fast," Ethan said quietly, repeating his earlier observation. "Not with me, not with anyone." Maya's eyes shifted to him, soft but guarded. Babies are unpredictable. Sometimes they just need what they need in that exact moment. You knew what he needed. Ethan pressed. You knew immediately. How? Maya's fingers traced a gentle pattern on Oliver's back, an absent-minded gesture that spoke of muscle memory and experience. "I told you. I worked in neonatal care for 5 years. You learn to read infant cues pretty quickly. But you said you're a lactation consultant now." "I said I'm certified," Maya corrected gently. "I don't actually practice anymore." Ethan frowned. "Why not? You're obviously gifted at it." Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My son used to cry just like Oliver. That same desperate sound when he was hungry and couldn't settle." The words hung in the air between them. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. "You have a son?" "Had." The single word was heavy with grief. Ethan felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Maya interrupted, though her voice wavered. "Most people don't know. It's not exactly something that comes up in casual conversation." Before Ethan could respond, a voice cut through their moment. The wealthy man seated directly behind them, the one who'd been complaining earlier, leaned forward with an expression of distaste. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he announced loudly enough for several rows to hear. "A complete stranger breastfeeding someone else's child. There have to be health regulations against that sort of thing." Several passengers turned to look. The college kid across the aisle pulled off his headphones, suddenly interested. Even a flight attendant passing through with a trash bag slowed her pace. Ethan felt heat rise in his face, but before he could speak, Maya's calm voice cut through. "There are no regulations against it," she said evenly, not turning to face the man. "In fact, The WHO and American Academy of Pediatrics both recognize wet nursing and milk sharing as valid forms of infant feeding when done safely. It's unsanitary, the man insisted. I'm disease-free, vaccinated, and I still produce milk, Maya replied matter-of-factly. I'm probably safer than half the food served on this plane. A few passengers chuckled. The older woman with silver hair who'd defended Maya earlier raised her coffee cup in a small salute. But the man behind them wasn't finished. It's inappropriate. Children's services should probably be notified that he's allowing this. Something in Ethan snapped. He'd spent the entire flight feeling judged, feeling inadequate, feeling like a failure as a father. But watching this stranger attack the woman who'd saved him from complete humiliation ignited something protective in him. He turned in his seat, his voice low but dangerous. That woman just did more for my son in 10 minutes than anyone else has been able to do in 4 months. If you have a problem with how I choose to care for my child, you can direct your complaints to me, and trust me, you don't want to do that. The businessman blinked, clearly not expecting such a forceful response. He settled back in his seat with a huff, but said nothing more. Ethan turned back around, his jaw still tight. He could feel Maya's eyes on him, and when he met her gaze, he saw something new there. Surprise, maybe even a hint of respect. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did. Ethan's voice was firm. You helped us. The least I can do is defend you from ignorant comments. Maya smiled. A small, sad smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. People always have opinions about how others should parent. I learned that the hard way. What do you mean? Maya looked down at Oliver, her expression shifting into something haunted. When my son got sick, everyone had advice. Feed him this way, hold him that way, try this supplement, see that specialist. Everyone knew better than I did, even though I'd literally been trained for this. And when he died, her voice caught. She took a breath, steadying herself. When he died, they had opinions about that too, about what I should have done differently, about signs I should have caught, as if I hadn't spent every single moment trying to save him. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. How old was he? 7 months. Maya's eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. His name was Isaiah. He had a congenital heart defect that nobody caught until it was too late. One day he was fine, and the next. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan found himself reaching out, placing his hand gently on her arm. I'm so sorry, I can't imagine. No, Maya agreed quietly. You can't. Nobody can unless they've lived it. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared vulnerability settling between them. Around them, the plane continued its journey through the sky, oblivious to the raw emotion in row 18. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice softer than before. Is that why you helped? Because of your son? Maya considered the question carefully. Partly, but mostly because I couldn't stand watching Oliver suffer when I knew I could help. Losing Isaiah doesn't mean I stop caring about other children. If anything, it makes me care more. Ethan studied her face, seeing past the calm exterior to the grief underneath. That's incredibly brave. It's not bravery, Maya said with a slight shake of her head. It's just what you do when you survive something terrible. You find ways to make it mean something. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He looked down at his own hands, thinking about his own struggles and fears. I'm raising Oliver alone, he admitted suddenly. His mother left 2 weeks after he was born. She said she never wanted a baby, that I'd trapped her, that she couldn't do this. Maya's expression softened with understanding. That must have been devastating. It was humiliating, Ethan corrected, his voice bitter. She made me feel like I'd ruined her life, like wanting our child was some kind of crime. We'd planned the pregnancy together, or so I thought. But after Oliver was born, she completely shut down. Wouldn't hold him, wouldn't feed him, barely looked at him. Then one morning I woke up and she was just gone. Left a note saying she couldn't pretend anymore. "I'm sorry," Maya said, and Ethan could hear the genuine compassion in her voice. "Postpartum depression and anxiety can—" "I know," Ethan interrupted. "I tried to get her help. But she refused, said there was nothing wrong with her except the baby. Except our son." His voice broke slightly on the last words. Maya's hand moved to cover his where it still rested on her arm. "Oliver is lucky to have you," she said firmly. "A parent who stays, who tries, who fights through their own fear and exhaustion. That's what matters. Not the mistakes, not the moments of helplessness, just showing up every single day." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who understood loss in ways he was only beginning to grasp. "Do the hard days ever get easier?" Maya glanced down at Oliver, sleeping peacefully against her chest. "They get different. Some days are bearable. Some days still feel impossible. But you learn to carry it. How do you do it? How do you keep going after losing your child?" "Honestly," Maya's voice was barely audible, "some days I don't know. I just wake up and put one foot in front of the other. I volunteer with missing children organizations. I memorize faces on posters because nobody memorized Isaiah's face when I needed them to. I do things that would have helped me when I was drowning." Ethan absorbed this, feeling a strange kinship with this woman he'd known for less than 2 hours. They came from completely different worlds. He with his wealth and success, she with her quiet life and devastating loss. But in this moment, they understood each other perfectly. Oliver stirred slightly, making a small sound. Maya adjusted her hold, and the baby settled again immediately. Ethan watched the interaction with a mixture of awe and envy. "He trusts you," Ethan observed. "He barely knows you, but he trusts you completely." "Babies are intuitive," Maya explained. "They respond to confidence and calmness. You're stressed, understandably, and he feels that. It makes him more anxious. So what am I supposed to do? Just magically stop being stressed?" "No," Maya said with a gentle smile. "But you can learn techniques to manage it. Breathing exercises, mindfulness, even just acknowledging your feelings instead of fighting them. Babies don't need perfect parents. They just need present ones." The word struck Ethan deeply. Present ones. He thought about all the board meetings he'd scheduled, all the emails he still answered at 3 in the morning while Oliver cried. He was physically there, but was he really present? "I don't know how to be that," he admitted, his voice raw. "I built a $200 million company from nothing. I can code in 7 languages, but I can't figure out how to comfort my own son." "You're figuring it out right now," Maya pointed out. "You swallowed your pride and let me help. That takes strength." Before Ethan could respond, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we're hitting some rough air. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The plane jolted again, harder this time. A few passengers gasped. Somewhere behind them, someone's laptop slid off their tray table and clattered to the floor. Oliver's eyes flew open. For a moment, he looked confused and disoriented. Then his face began to crumple. "Oh no," Ethan breathed. But Maya was already moving, adjusting Oliver's position, speaking to him in soft, soothing tones. "You're okay, sweetheart. Just a little bump. You're safe." Oliver whimpered but didn't start crying. His tiny hand reached up, grasping at Maya's sweater. She caught his hand gently, letting him hold her finger. The plane bucked again, more violently this time. The lights flickered. A flight attendant walking down the aisle had to grab a seat back to steady herself. The businessman's drink spilled, splashing across his expensive suit. He cursed loudly. More turbulence hit, sustained and rough. The plane seemed to drop for a sickening second before catching itself. Several passengers screamed. Overhead compartments rattled. The college kid across the aisle went pale, gripping his armrests with white knuckles. And then Maya noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the back of the plane, a man in a dark hoodie had stood up despite the seatbelt sign. He was clutching a bag to his chest, moving toward the bathroom with quick, jerky movements. But it wasn't just his disregard for safety that caught Maya's attention. It was the way he moved. The way his eyes darted around the cabin, the way he kept looking over his shoulder. Maya had spent 3 years volunteering with organizations that searched for missing children. She'd memorized hundreds of faces from posters and alerts, and she was almost certain she'd seen this man's face before. Her heart began to pound. She leaned close to Ethan, keeping her voice low and urgent. "Don't look now, but there's a man in the back, dark hoodie, about 6 rows behind us. Do you see him?" Ethan carefully turned his head, pretending to look out the window while actually scanning the cabin. He spotted the man immediately. "Yeah. What about him?" "Something's wrong," Maya whispered. "He's been acting strangely since we boarded, and I think I've seen his face on a missing child alert." Ethan's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Not completely, but my instincts are screaming at me." The hooded man reached the bathroom and slipped inside, still clutching his bag. Maya's eyes stayed locked on that door. The turbulence continued, the plane shaking and bouncing, but Maya barely noticed. Her mind was racing through every missing child poster she'd seen in the past month, trying to place that face. Then it hit her. 2 weeks ago. A custody dispute in Ohio. A father who'd taken his 18-month-old son during a supervised visit and disappeared. The alert had described him as potentially dangerous, desperate, and likely to flee the state or the country. "Ethan," Maya said urgently, "I need you to trust me. That man might have a child with him. A kidnapped child." Ethan stared at her. "In the bathroom? In that bag he was carrying? That's impossible. How could a child?" "It was the right size," Maya insisted, "and the way he was holding it, like it was precious, but also like he was afraid someone would take it. I've seen that before. Parents who've lost custody and taken their children back illegally. They carry them in bags to get through security." Ethan looked skeptical, but he could see the conviction in Maya's eyes. "What do you want to do?" "We need to alert the flight crew. During turbulence, with no proof. If I'm right and we do nothing, that child could be taken out of the country. If I'm wrong, we apologize and everyone moves on. But I can't take the chance of being right and staying silent." Ethan saw the determination in her face and realized this wasn't just about a potential kidnapping. This was about Isaiah, about the child Maya couldn't save, about finding meaning in her loss. "Okay," he said. "We tell them." Maya carefully transferred Oliver back to Ethan. The baby protested, his face scrunching up, but Ethan held him close, whispering reassurances. Maya pressed the call button above her seat. Nothing happened. The turbulence was too severe. The flight attendants were probably all strapped into their jump seats. The bathroom door opened. The hooded man emerged, still carrying the bag. But something had changed. His movements were more frantic now. He stumbled as the plane bucked, barely catching himself. And for just a moment, Maya saw his face clearly. It was him. She was certain now. The man made his way back down the aisle, fighting against the turbulence. As he passed their row, Maya caught sight of the bag more clearly. It shifted in a way that luggage shouldn't shift. Something inside was moving. Her heart stopped. She was right. There was a child in that bag. But before she could react, another flight attendant appeared. The strict one who'd tried to stop Maya from helping Oliver earlier. She spotted Maya and immediately headed toward them, her expression stern. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you about earlier." the attendant said sharply, ignoring the turbulence rocking the plane. There are regulations about— Not now, Maya interrupted, her eyes still tracking the hooded man. There's a man in this cabin who might have a kidnapped child. The attendant's expression shifted from stern to annoyed. Ma'am, I understand you're trying to deflect from the inappropriate situation earlier, but making false accusations. I'm not making false accusations. Maya's voice rose, drawing attention from nearby passengers. I volunteer with missing children organizations. I memorize faces. That man is wanted for custodial kidnapping, and I believe he has a child concealed in that bag. The attendant looked at her like she was crazy. That's impossible. Security would have caught. Security doesn't check every piece of carry-on luggage thoroughly, Maya insisted. And desperate. Parents find ways. Please, you have to check. But the attendant's face had hardened. She clearly thought Maya was trying to distract from her earlier actions with Oliver. Ma'am, return to your seat immediately, or I will have to file a report. Then file your damn report, Maya snapped, her composure finally cracking. But check that man's bag first. The entire cabin seemed to go quiet despite the ongoing turbulence. Even the businessmen who'd been complaining earlier leaned forward, fascinated by the unfolding drama. And then Ethan stood up, Oliver still in his arms, his voice cutting through the tension with cold authority. She is with me, he announced, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Her name is Maya Thompson. She is a certified infant care specialist who helped my son when he was in distress. If you file a report against her for that act of compassion, I will personally ensure this airline faces a lawsuit that will make national headlines. I have the resources and the lawyers to make that happen. He paused, letting his words sink in, then continued with even more intensity. But more importantly, she is telling you there might be a child in danger on this plane. So instead of harassing her, I suggest you do your job and investigate her claim, because if she's right and you ignored her, that's going to be a much bigger problem for everyone involved. The attendant's face went pale. She looked from Ethan to Maya to the hooded man, who had now slumped in his seat several rows back, the bag clutched on his lap. I'll alert the captain, she finally stammered. Good, Ethan said firmly. You do that, now. The attendant hurried away, speaking urgently into her communication device. Maya sank back into her seat, her heart pounding. Oliver, sensing the tension, began to fuss. Ethan tried to soothe him, but his own hands were shaking. Maya looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and surprise. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Ethan replied. We need to be right about this. We are, Maya said with certainty. I know we are. The turbulence was finally beginning to ease. The plane steadied, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the cabin began to return to normal. But the tension in row 18, and in the back where the hooded man sat, was just beginning to build. Within minutes, the captain himself emerged from the cockpit, followed by 2 flight attendants and an off-duty air marshal who'd been flying as a passenger. They approached the hooded man carefully, professionally. Maya and Ethan watched from their seats, hardly breathing. Oliver had finally settled against his father's chest, but Ethan's arms were tight around him, protective, possessive. Sir, we need to inspect your bag, the captain said to the hooded man. The man's face went white. No, it's personal belongings. You can't. We can and we will, the air marshal said firmly. Place the bag on the seat. For a moment, it looked like the man might refuse, might try to run, though there was nowhere to go on a plane at 30,000 feet. His eyes darted around desperately, and Maya saw the exact moment he realized he was caught. Slowly, reluctantly, he placed the bag on the seat. The air marshal unzipped it carefully. And there, wrapped in blankets and barely moving, was a toddler. A little boy, no more than 18 months old, with sweat-dampened hair and glassy eyes. The cabin erupted in gasps and exclamations. Several passengers stood to get a better look. The college kid pulled out his phone before remembering he couldn't get service. The businessman muttered, "Holy hell." Maya's hand flew to her mouth. She'd been right, but seeing the confirmation made her knees weak. That poor baby. How long had he been in that bag? How terrified must he have been? The air marshal immediately took charge, removing the child from the bag and checking him over. The little boy didn't cry. He seemed too exhausted or traumatized to react much at all, but his eyes were open and he was breathing. The hooded man lunged forward desperately. "He's my son. His mother took him from me. She lied in court. They were trying to take him away forever." "Sir, step back," the air marshal commanded, physically blocking the man. "You're under arrest for custodial kidnapping. You have the right to remain silent." But Maya wasn't listening to the Miranda rights being read. She was already out of her seat, moving toward the back of the plane where the air marshal was trying to assess the child, while keeping the father restrained. "Let me help," Maya said, her voice steady and professional despite her racing heart. "I'm a trained infant care specialist. That child is in distress." The air marshal looked at her skeptically, but the captain nodded. "She's the one who identified the situation. Let her help." Maya knelt beside the toddler, her hands gentle but efficient as she checked him over. Severely dehydrated, overheated, possibly in shock, but alive, breathing, savable. "We need cool water, not cold," she directed to a flight attendant. "And something with electrolytes if you have it. Pedialyte if possible, but even diluted juice will work. Wet towels for his forehead and neck." The attendants scrambled to follow her instructions. Maya carefully lifted the little boy, speaking to him in the same soothing tones she'd used with Oliver. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. I know you're scared, but you're going to be okay. Can you tell me your name?" The boy just stared at her with wide, frightened eyes. Behind her, the father was still protesting, his voice breaking with desperation and rage. "She lied. The courts lied. He's my son." Maya turned to look at him, and their eyes met. What she saw there wasn't evil. It was pain. Desperation. The look of a parent who believed he was saving his child, not harming him. But intention didn't matter when a child was stuffed in a bag, unable to breathe properly, overheating, terrified. "He needs medical attention," Maya said quietly to the air marshal. "We need to land as soon as possible." The captain nodded grimly and headed back to the cockpit to arrange an emergency landing. Ethan appeared at Maya's side, Oliver still in his arms. He looked at the rescued toddler, then at Maya, and something shifted in his expression. Not attraction, not yet, but profound respect. Maybe even awe. "You saved him," Ethan said quietly. "If you hadn't noticed, hadn't pushed, hadn't made them check." "I almost didn't," Maya admitted, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "I almost convinced myself I was wrong, that I was seeing things that weren't there because of Isaiah." "But you didn't," Ethan pressed. "You trusted your instincts. And you saved this child's life." Maya looked down at the toddler in her arms, who was finally starting to respond to the cool water and gentle care. His eyes were more focused now, his breathing easier. "2 children," Ethan corrected, glancing at Oliver. "You saved 2 children today." Maya's eyes filled with tears that she'd been holding back for hours, for years. Tears for Isaiah, for Oliver, for this nameless toddler, for all the children she'd tried to save and couldn't, and for the ones she could. The plane began its descent toward the nearest airport. Emergency vehicles would be waiting. Police, paramedics, social services. The drama was far from over. But in that moment, surrounded by chaos and emotion and the weight of what had just happened, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. purpose, maybe even the smallest glimmer of healing. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, steady but urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an emergency landing at Dublin Airport in approximately 20 minutes. Please remain calm and follow all crew instructions." A ripple of anxiety swept through the cabin. Passengers who'd been watching the drama unfold in the back suddenly realized this wasn't just entertainment. This was serious. The college kid across from Maya went pale again. The businessman started frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to rebook his connection. Maya barely heard any of it. Her entire focus was on the toddler in her arms. She'd positioned him carefully, keeping his head elevated, monitoring his breathing. The cool water had helped, but he was still severely dehydrated and showing signs of heat exhaustion. "What's his name?" Maya asked the hooded man, who was now seated with the air marshal standing guard over him, despite everything she needed to know. Children responded better when you used their names. The man's face crumpled. All the desperation and rage had drained away, leaving only grief. "Liam," he whispered. "His name is Liam." "How old is he?" 16 months. The man's voice broke. "His birthday was last week. I wasn't allowed to see him. The court said I was a flight risk, that I'd try to take him." They were right. Maya felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Anger at what this man had done, putting his child in a bag, risking his life, traumatizing him. But also a painful understanding of the desperation that drove parents to unthinkable acts. "Liam," Maya said softly to the boy, "you're being so brave. Just a little longer, sweetheart, and we'll get you feeling better." Liam's eyes fixed on her face. His lips were dry and cracked, his cheeks flushed with fever. But there was a flicker of recognition in his gaze now, the understanding that this person holding him was safe. Ethan stood nearby, Oliver still in his arms. His son had been remarkably calm through all of this, as if sensing that something important was happening. Or maybe he was just exhausted from his earlier crying fit. "Can I do anything?" Ethan asked Maya quietly. "Just keep Oliver calm," Maya replied. "The last thing we need is both babies upset." A flight attendant, not the strict one, but the kind woman named Janet, who'd tried to help earlier, brought more water and some crackers. "Will he eat something?" Maya tested one of the crackers against Liam's lips. He turned away, too overwhelmed to eat. "Not yet, but the water is helping." Janet nodded, then looked at Maya with something like awe. "How did you know? About him being in the bag?" "I memorize faces," Maya explained, her eyes never leaving Liam. "Missing child posters, Amber Alerts. I've been doing it for 3 years. His face was on an alert 2 weeks ago." "That's incredible," Janet breathed. "You literally saved this child's life." Maya didn't respond. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd finally been in the right place at the right time to make a difference. It didn't erase Isaiah. It didn't heal that wound. But it meant something. The strict flight attendant who'd tried to reprimand Maya earlier approached hesitantly. Her expression was completely different now, embarrassed, almost apologetic. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. If I'd listened to you sooner." "It doesn't matter now," Maya interrupted gently. "What matters is that Liam is safe." The woman nodded, relief washing over her face. She glanced at Oliver in Ethan's arms, then back at Maya. "And for earlier, with the baby, I was wrong to question your methods. You were helping, and I couldn't see past the rules to recognize that." Maya offered a small smile. "Apology accepted." The plane began its descent, the change in altitude making everyone's ears pop. Liam whimpered, clearly uncomfortable. Maya adjusted him carefully, speaking in soothing tones. "I know, sweetheart. Your ears hurt. Try to swallow for me. That's it. Good boy." Behind them, the hooded man, Liam's father, watched with tears streaming down his face. The air marshal kept a firm grip on his arm, but there was something almost pitying in the officer's expression now. "His mother," the man said suddenly, his voice raw. "Does she know? Have they told her he's safe?" The captain, who'd emerged from the cockpit again to oversee the situation, nodded. "We've been in contact with authorities on the ground. She's been notified that your son has been located and is receiving care. Tell her—" The man's voice broke completely. "Tell her I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting him. I thought if I could just get him somewhere safe, prove that she was lying about me." "Save it for the police," the air marshal said, not unkindly. "You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself." Maya felt Ethan's hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him and saw her own complicated emotions reflected in his eyes. They were both parents, or had been, in Maya's case. They both understood the terror of losing a child, even if the circumstances were vastly different. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked quietly. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "Ask me when we're on the ground." The plane descended steadily. Through the windows, passengers could see the Irish coastline appearing through breaks in the clouds. Dublin Airport sprawled below them, and even from this height, they could see the emergency vehicles gathering on the tarmac. Ambulances, police cars, fire trucks. "They're really pulling out all the stops," the businessman muttered from behind them. The college kid had his face pressed to the window, filming everything on his phone now that they were low enough for it not to matter. "This is insane. Wait until my roommates hear about this." The landing was smooth despite the circumstances. The pilot had clearly done this before. Emergency landings with precious cargo that needed immediate attention. The plane touched down gently and taxied quickly toward the waiting emergency crews. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated," the captain announced. "Emergency personnel will be boarding first to assess the medical situation. After that, we'll need statements from several passengers regarding the incident." The moment the plane stopped, the door opened and paramedics rushed in. Two of them immediately went to Maya and Liam. One was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient hands. The other was a younger man carrying a medical bag. "I'm Sarah, this is Connor," the woman said. "We'll take over from here." Maya hesitated for just a second before transferring Liam to Sarah's arms. The toddler's face scrunched up, threatening to cry. But Sarah was already assessing him with practiced skill. "Dehydration, possible heat exhaustion," Maya reported quickly, slipping into the professional tone she hadn't used in years. "He's been drinking water but refusing food. Vitals seem stable but should be monitored for shock." Sarah glanced at her with respect. "Medical training?" "Neonatal care specialist." "Former." "Well, you did everything right. Probably saved him from serious complications." Connor had already hooked up a small portable monitor to check Liam's vitals more thoroughly. "Temp is 101.3. Not critical, but elevated. Heart rate's a bit high, but not alarming. We'll transport him immediately for full evaluation." As they worked, police officers boarded the plane. Two of them went directly to Liam's father, officially placing him under arrest and reading him his rights again. Another officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, approached Maya. "Detective Claire Sullivan," she introduced herself. "You're the one who identified the suspect." "I recognized him from a missing child alert," Maya confirmed. "I volunteer with organizations that track missing children, so I memorize the posters." Sullivan's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a skill. We'll need a full statement from you. Are you willing to come to the station?" "Of course. And you, sir?" Sullivan turned to Ethan. "You were seated next to this woman." "Yes, and I can corroborate everything," Ethan said firmly. "She tried to alert the flight crew earlier, but there was some resistance. If they'd acted on her initial warning, we might have landed even sooner." The strict flight attendant standing nearby went pale but said nothing. Sullivan made notes in a small pad. We'll need statements from both of you then. The airline is arranging accommodations since this flight obviously won't continue to London on schedule. More police officers were questioning other passengers now, getting their accounts of what they'd seen. The businessman was eagerly explaining how he'd witnessed the whole thing. The college kid was practically bouncing with excitement as he described the dramatic confrontation. The paramedics carefully loaded Liam onto a small stretcher, keeping him stable as they prepared to transport him to the ambulance waiting outside. As they passed Maya's row, Liam's hand reached out, his fingers grasping toward her. Maya's breath caught. She stepped forward instinctively, taking his small hand in hers. "You're okay, Liam. These people are going to take good care of you. Your mama will be there soon." Sarah, the paramedic, smiled. "Would you like to ride with us? Sometimes having a familiar face helps keep them calm." Maya glanced at Ethan, uncertain. Oliver was peaceful in his father's arms now, but what if he needed her again? Ethan saw her hesitation, and he immediately nodded. "Go. We'll be fine. Oliver's good right now, and you should be there for Liam." "Are you sure?" "Positive." Ethan's expression was soft, almost tender. "You've already done so much for us. Go help that little boy." Maya squeezed his arm gratefully, then followed the paramedics off the plane. The Irish air was cool and misty, a stark contrast to the recycled airplane atmosphere. The ambulance was waiting, back doors open, equipment gleaming inside. As they loaded Liam in, Maya climbed in after him, sitting on the small bench seat. Connor hooked up an IV line with practiced efficiency, while Sarah monitored the boy's vitals continuously. "You're good with kids," Connor observed, as Maya kept Liam calm with gentle touches and soft words. "I used to be better," Maya replied quietly, "before I lost my own son." Sarah's eyes filled with quick sympathy. "I'm so sorry. How old?" 7 months. 3 years ago. And you still work with children?" Connor looked impressed. "That takes courage." "I don't work with them anymore, actually. Today was unexpected." The ambulance pulled away from the plane, sirens silent but lights flashing. Through the small windows, Maya could see the massive aircraft sitting on the tarmac, emergency vehicles still clustered around it. "What happened to your son?" Sarah asked gently. "If you don't mind my asking." "Congenital heart defect. They didn't catch it until it was too late." Maya's voice was steady, but her hand trembled slightly as she stroked Liam's hair. One day he was fine, laughing and playing. The next day he was gone. "That's every parent's nightmare," Connor said quietly. "It is," Maya agreed. "But you don't stop being a parent just because your child is gone. The love doesn't go anywhere. So I try to channel it into something useful. Memorizing faces of missing kids, volunteering when I can. It's not the same as having Isaiah back, but it means his life mattered, that losing him changed me in ways that can still help others." The ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance of the hospital. More medical staff were waiting, ready to take over Liam's care. As they transferred him to a hospital gurney, a woman came running through the automatic doors, her face streaked with tears. "Liam. Oh God, Liam." It was clearly his mother. She was younger than Maya had expected, maybe mid-20s with the same dark hair as her son. Her eyes were wild with relief and terror. "Ma'am, you need to stay back while we examine him," a nurse said, but the mother pushed past, dropping to her knees beside the gurney. "Baby, Mama's here. You're safe now. You're safe." She was sobbing, her hands touching Liam's face, his hands, his hair, as if confirming he was real. Liam's eyes focused on his mother, and for the first time since Maya had found him, he made a sound. Not a cry, but a small whimper of recognition. "Mama." The single word broke everyone's heart. His mother looked up at the medical staff, tears streaming. "Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay." He's dehydrated and exhausted, but he's going to be fine, Sarah assured her. Thanks in large part to this woman. She gestured to Maya. She identified the situation and kept him stable until we arrived. The mother turned to Maya, her expression transforming from fear to overwhelming gratitude. She stood and grabbed Maya's hands, squeezing them tightly. Thank you. Thank you so much. If he'd been in that bag much longer. She couldn't finish the sentence, overcome with emotion. I'm just glad I noticed, Maya said softly. Your son is strong. He's going to be fine. What's your name? Maya Thompson. I'm Jennifer Williams, and I will never ever forget what you did today. Jennifer's voice was fierce with sincerity. Never. They wheeled Liam inside, Jennifer walking alongside the gurney, never letting go of her son's hand. Maya stood in the emergency bay, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the past few hours. She'd helped 2 babies today. Oliver, who'd needed comfort and feeding, and Liam, who'd needed rescue. Neither of them was Isaiah. Nothing could bring Isaiah back, but maybe that was okay. Maybe she could honor her son's memory by being there for other children who needed her. Maybe that was enough. A car pulled up behind the ambulance, a police vehicle. Detective Sullivan stepped out along with 2 other officers. Ms. Thompson, we need that statement now if you're up for it. Maya nodded, climbing into the back of the police car. As they drove toward the station, she saw another vehicle arriving at the hospital, this one carrying Liam's father in handcuffs. Their cars passed each other, and for a brief moment, Maya saw his face through the window. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who'd made terrible choices out of desperate love. She thought about Ethan, raising Oliver alone, terrified of doing everything wrong. She thought about Jennifer, who'd just gotten her son back but would carry the trauma of almost losing him forever. She thought about Liam's father, who'd loved his son so much that he'd destroyed both their lives trying to keep him. Parenthood was complicated. Love was complicated. And sometimes the line between protection and harm got blurred by fear and desperation. At the police station, Maya spent an hour giving her statement. She described recognizing the man's face from the alert, noticing his suspicious behavior, seeing the bag move in an unnatural way. She explained her background, her volunteer work, why she'd been so certain something was wrong. Detective Sullivan listened intently, taking detailed notes. Your instincts were spot on. If you hadn't pushed the issue, if you'd let the flight attendant dismiss your concerns, we'd be dealing with a very different situation right now. That child might have been out of the country before we even knew where to look. I almost did let it go, Maya admitted. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. But you didn't, and that matters. Sullivan closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. We see a lot of awful things in this job. Child abductions, custody disputes that turn violent, parents who hurt their kids in the name of love. But we also see people like you, ordinary people who step up when it matters. You're one of the good ones, Miss Thompson. Maya felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. I just did what anyone would do. No, Sullivan said firmly. Most people wouldn't have noticed, and of those who did notice, most wouldn't have pushed past the resistance you faced. You saved that little boy's life today. Own that. When Maya finally emerged from the police station, the sun was setting over Dublin. The misty morning had given way to a clear evening, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. A figure was waiting outside, leaning against a rental car. Ethan straightened when he saw her, Oliver sleeping peacefully in a carrier strapped to his chest. You waited, Maya said, surprised. Of course I waited. Ethan's expression was soft, concerned. How are you? Exhausted, overwhelmed, but okay, I think. Liam, he's going to be fine, reunited with his mother. They're keeping him overnight for observation, but the doctors say he'll make a full recovery. Ethan nodded, relief evident on his face. That's good. That's really good. They stood there for a moment, two people who'd been strangers this morning and now felt connected by shared trauma, shared purpose, shared understanding. The airline put me up in a hotel nearby, Ethan said. They did the same for you, I assume? Yes. They gave me the information at the station. It's the same hotel. The whole flight got rebooked for tomorrow morning. Ethan hesitated, then added, Would you like to get dinner? Nothing fancy, just, I think we both could use some food and some normal conversation after all this. Maya looked at him. Really looked at him. This morning he'd been a stressed, defensive stranger. Now he was someone who'd stood up for her, who'd trusted her instincts, who'd shown her his own vulnerabilities and fears. Dinner sounds good, she agreed. They drove to the hotel in comfortable silence, Oliver sleeping the entire way. The hotel was nice but not extravagant, the kind of place airlines booked for stranded passengers. They checked into their separate rooms, agreed to meet in the lobby in 30 minutes, and parted ways. Maya stood in her room, staring at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. Her hair was a mess. She looked like she'd been through something intense, which she had. But there was something else in her reflection, too, something she hadn't seen in 3 years. A sense of purpose, of worth, of being needed. She thought about Oliver, how he'd calmed in her arms, about Liam, how he'd reached for her as they loaded him into the ambulance, about Ethan, how he'd defended her and trusted her when he had every reason not to. Maybe she wasn't broken beyond repair after all. Maybe there was still a life to be lived, still ways to make a difference, still reasons to keep going. She washed her face, changed her clothes, and headed down to the lobby to meet Ethan. Whatever happened next, she was ready for it. The hotel restaurant was quiet, tucked away from the main lobby with soft lighting and the gentle clink of silverware against plates. Maya and Ethan found a corner table by a window overlooking the Dublin streets, now lit with street lamps and the occasional passing car. Oliver was still asleep in his carrier, which Ethan had positioned carefully in a chair beside him. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell with peaceful regularity. His face relaxed in a way Maya hadn't seen during their chaotic flight. A waitress appeared with menus and water glasses. "Good evening. Can I start you off with anything to drink?" "Just water for me," Maya said quietly. "Same," Ethan agreed. "And maybe some coffee after dinner. It's been a long day." The waitress smiled knowingly. "You're from the diverted flight, aren't you? Word travels fast in a hotel like this. I heard what happened. That kidnapped baby. Absolutely terrifying." "It was intense," Ethan said carefully, clearly not wanting to get into details. "Well, you're safe now. That's what matters." The waitress left them with the menus, promising to return shortly. Maya picked up her menu but didn't really look at it. Her mind was still processing everything that had happened. This morning she'd boarded a plane alone, expecting a quiet flight. Now she was sitting across from a billionaire tech entrepreneur and his infant son, having saved 2 babies and helped capture a kidnapping suspect. "You okay?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. "I'm not sure," Maya admitted. "I keep replaying it all. What if I'd been wrong about Liam's father? What if I hadn't noticed him at all? What if—" "You can't think like that," Ethan interrupted gently. "You were right. You did notice. And because of that, a little boy is safe with his mother right now." Maya nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "His father loved him, you know. I could see it in his eyes. He genuinely believed he was protecting Liam. Doesn't make what he did okay." "No," Maya agreed, "but it makes it understandable. Desperation makes people do terrible things. I've seen it before. Parents who lose custody and convince themselves the system is wrong, that they're the only ones who can truly protect their children. Ethan studied her face, seeing the pain beneath her words. You really do memorize those missing child posters. Every single one I see. Names, faces, ages, last known locations. It's compulsive at this point. Maya's fingers traced the rim of her water glass. After Isaiah died, I felt so helpless, like I'd failed at the most important job I'd ever had. Memorizing those faces, volunteering with search organizations. It gave me a way to channel all that grief into something useful. Do you ever find them? The missing children? Sometimes, not often enough. Maya's voice grew quieter. Most of the time they're found by law enforcement, or they turn up on their own. But occasionally someone recognizes a face from a poster and calls it in. And when that happens, when a child comes home because someone paid attention, it helps. It doesn't fix what happened to Isaiah, but it helps. The waitress returned to take their orders. Maya chose a simple pasta dish without really thinking about it. Ethan ordered a burger, then added a side of fruit when the waitress mentioned they had fresh berries. Old habits from trying to eat healthier, Maya guessed. When they were alone again, Ethan leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you offer to nurse Oliver? That's not something most people would do, even with medical training. Maya was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Because I could still help, even though Isaiah is gone. My body still produces milk. It's been 3 years, but I've kept my lactation going deliberately. It's one of the only physical connections I have left to being his mother. Ethan's expression shifted to something tender and heartbroken. Maya, I know it probably sounds strange, she continued. My therapist says it's part of my grieving process, that eventually I'll need to let it go. But every time I think about stopping, I feel like I'm losing him all over again. Like I'm erasing the last proof that he existed. He existed, Ethan said firmly. His life mattered. And what you did today, helping Oliver, saving Liam, that's proof of Isaiah's impact. You became the person you are because of him. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. I want to believe that. Then believe it. Ethan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. You saved my sanity today. Oliver was inconsolable and I was falling apart. I've been falling apart since his mother left, if I'm honest. Trying to run a company while learning to be a parent, pretending I have everything under control when I clearly don't. Why were you traveling alone with him? Maya asked. No nanny, no help? Ethan's jaw tightened. Pride, mostly. Everyone kept telling me I couldn't do it alone, that I needed to hire full-time help. My mother, my business partner, even Oliver's mother before she left. They all said I was in over my head, so I decided to prove them wrong. I scheduled this trip to London to meet with investors, convinced myself I could handle a transatlantic flight with a 4-month-old. And then, reality hit. Hard, Ethan confirmed. I made it about 3 minutes into the flight before realizing I'd made a massive mistake. But by then it was too late to turn back. Maya offered a small smile. For what it's worth, I think trying makes you a good father. Not a perfect one, but a present one. That's what matters. You said that on the plane. That babies don't need perfect parents, just present ones. It's true. I worked with hundreds of families in neonatal care. The ones who struggled most weren't the ones who made mistakes. It was the ones who gave up. The ones who decided they couldn't do it and stopped trying. Maya paused, her expression turning inward. Isaiah's father did that. He left when we found out about the heart defect. Said he couldn't handle having a sick child, that it wasn't what he signed up for. Ethan's eyes widened. He left you alone with a dying baby? He left before Isaiah even came home from the NICU. I spent 7 months as a single parent, watching my son struggle to live, knowing every day might be his last. And when he died, I had to face that grief completely alone. That's unconscionable, Ethan said, anger flashing in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. It shaped me, though. Made me understand that showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're terrified and have no idea what you're doing, that's what parenting is. Not having all the answers, not being perfect, just being there." Their food arrived, interrupting the heavy conversation. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Oliver stirred in his carrier, making small movements but not waking. Ethan immediately tensed, ready to spring into action, but Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Let him settle himself. He's just shifting positions." Sure enough, Oliver made a tiny sighing sound and relaxed again, still asleep. "How did you know he'd settle?" Ethan asked. "Experience, and paying attention to his cues. He wasn't building up to a cry, just adjusting." Maya took a bite of her pasta, then added, "You'll learn to read him too. It takes time. Will you teach me?" The question hung in the air between them. Maya looked up from her plate, meeting Ethan's eyes. There was vulnerability there, and hope, and something else she couldn't quite identify. "What do you mean?" "Earlier on the plane, before everything happened with Liam, I asked if you'd consider working with us. I meant it." Ethan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "I need help, Maya. Real help. Not just a nanny who follows instructions, but someone who understands babies the way you do. Someone who can teach me instead of just taking over." "Ethan, I know you're afraid," he continued. "You said it yourself. You're scared of forming attachments after losing Isaiah. But what if this could help you heal? What if helping Oliver could be part of your journey forward, not backward?" Maya's throat tightened. "What if I can't do it? What if I get too attached and then something happens? What if nothing happens? What if Oliver grows up healthy and you get to be part of that?" Ethan's voice was gentle but insistent. "You can't live your whole life protecting yourself from potential pain. That's not living, it's just surviving." The words struck deep. Maya had been surviving for 3 years, going through the motions, memorizing faces, volunteering with organizations, but never really engaging with life, never risking her heart again. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to decide right now. Just think about it." Ethan pulled out his phone and opened his notes app, typing quickly. "This is my personal number and email. We're on the same flight tomorrow morning. When we land in London, if you're interested, let me know. If not, I understand. But please, at least consider it." He showed her the screen, and Maya committed the information to memory out of habit. Then she nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." They finished their meal with lighter conversation. Ethan's company, Maya's volunteer work, favorite books and movies. The kind of getting-to-know-you chat that people have when they're starting to become friends. Or maybe something more. When Oliver finally did wake up, Ethan lifted him from the carrier with noticeably more confidence than he'd shown that morning. He checked the diaper, grabbed a bottle from the insulated bag he'd brought down, and started feeding Oliver with only slightly fumbling hands. Maya watched, offering small corrections. "Angle the bottle a bit more so he doesn't swallow air. There, that's perfect." Oliver drank hungrily, his eyes tracking between his father's face and Maya's. When he finished, Ethan attempted to burp him, patting his back with uncertain pressure. "Firmer," Maya advised. "He's not going to break. You need to actually stimulate his digestive system." Ethan adjusted his technique, and within seconds, Oliver let out an impressive burp. Both adults laughed. "See? You're getting the hang of it," Maya said encouragingly. "Only because you're here to guide me." Ethan shifted Oliver to cradle him in his arms. "What happens tomorrow when we're on that plane and you're sitting somewhere else? Or when we land and go our separate ways?" Maya didn't have an answer for that. The thought of walking away from Oliver, from both of them, if she was honest, left an uncomfortable ache in her chest. "Let's get through tonight first," she said finally. One step at a time. They said goodnight in the lobby, Ethan heading to his room with Oliver while Maya went to hers. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the unfamiliar hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the entire day. Isaiah's face kept appearing in her mind, mixed with images of Oliver and Liam. 3 babies, 3 different stories, all connected to her in unexpected ways. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. "Thank you again for everything today. Oliver is sleeping peacefully. I think he misses you already. Ethan." Maya stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "Glad he's resting well. Get some sleep yourself. Tomorrow's another long flight." Another buzz. "Will you sit with us? On the plane?" Maya's finger hovered over the keyboard. Every logical part of her brain said she should create distance, protect herself, not get more involved than she already was. But her heart, the part of her that had been dormant for 3 years, whispered something different. "Yes, I'll sit with you." The next morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through Dublin's famous clouds. Maya packed her small bag, went through her morning routine, and met Ethan and Oliver in the lobby at 7 a.m. as arranged. Oliver was already fussing, and Ethan looked like he hadn't slept much. But there was something different about him now, less panicked, more determined. "Morning," he greeted her with a tired smile. "Ready for round 2? "As ready as I'll ever be." The ride to the airport was quiet, Oliver making small sounds of discontent but not yet crying. At the terminal, passengers from yesterday's diverted flight were being fast-tracked through security, airline representatives apologizing profusely and offering compensation vouchers. Maya and Ethan stayed close, moving through the process together. Other passengers from their flight recognized them and offered words of praise or curiosity. "You're the one who found the kidnapped baby, right?" a young woman asked Maya. "That was incredible." "Just paying attention," Maya replied modestly. On the plane, a different aircraft than yesterday's, Maya sat beside Ethan and Oliver in a row the airline had specially assigned them. The extra space was a small gesture of appreciation for their cooperation during yesterday's emergency. As they taxied toward the runway, Oliver began to cry. Not the desperate, frantic screaming of yesterday, but a tired, hungry cry that Maya recognized immediately. "He needs to eat," she said. Ethan fumbled for the bottle, but Oliver turned his head away just as he had yesterday. The familiar panic started to creep into Ethan's eyes. "May I?" Maya asked gently. Ethan nodded, passing Oliver to her. Maya settled the baby against her chest, adjusted her shawl discreetly, and within moments, Oliver was nursing peacefully. The change was just as dramatic as yesterday. Several passengers who'd been on the previous flight and recognized them smiled approvingly. One older man gave Ethan a thumbs up. As the plane climbed into the sky, Maya felt Oliver relax completely in her arms. His tiny hand rested against her chest, his breathing deepening as he drifted toward sleep. "You're so natural with him," Ethan said quietly. "Like you were meant to do this." "I was meant to do it with Isaiah," Maya replied. "This is borrowed time, borrowed purpose. Or maybe it's just purpose," Ethan suggested. "Maybe Isaiah's legacy is that you're here now, helping Oliver. That feels meaningful to me." Maya considered this as the plane leveled off, the seatbelt sign dinging off. Around them, passengers settled into their flights, pulling out books and tablets and neck pillows. "Tell me about your company," Maya said, changing the subject. "What do you actually do?" Ethan brightened slightly, clearly more comfortable talking about work than emotions. "We develop AI-assisted communication tools for people with speech disabilities. I started it after my younger sister was in a car accident that left her unable to speak. She used assistive technology, but it was clunky and limited. I thought we could do better. That's beautiful, Maya said genuinely. Purpose-driven work. Like your volunteer work, Ethan pointed out. We both turned pain into something constructive. They talked for the next hour, about technology and medicine, about Dublin and London, about everything except the real question hanging between them. Finally, as they approached British airspace, Ethan brought it up again. Have you thought about my offer? Maya looked down at Oliver, now fast asleep in her arms. She thought about Isaiah, about the 3 years she'd spent in grief and guilt. She thought about Liam and his desperate father. She thought about Jennifer Williams' gratitude and Detective Sullivan's words. You're one of the good ones. I'm afraid, she admitted. Terrified, actually. Of caring for him and then losing him. Of failing again. You didn't fail, Isaiah, Ethan said firmly. And you won't fail Oliver. But even if something happened, which it won't, would you rather never have tried? Never have made a difference in his life? Maya felt tears threatening again. When Isaiah died, I promised myself I'd never hurt like that again. Never love something so much that losing it would destroy me. How's that working out? Ethan asked gently. Maya let out a choked laugh. Terribly. I've been miserable for 3 years. Maybe it's time to try something different. Not forgetting Isaiah or replacing him. Just living again. For him and for yourself. The plane began its descent into London. The captain announced their approach, the seatbelt sign dinged on, and passengers around them started gathering their belongings. Maya held Oliver through the descent, through the landing, through the taxi to the gate. Only when the plane stopped completely did she finally answer Ethan's question. Okay, she whispered. I'll try, for Oliver, and maybe, for me. Ethan's face transformed with relief and joy. Really? Really. But I need time to arrange things. I have an apartment in Chicago, commitments with my volunteer organizations. I can't just disappear. Take all the time you need. We'll be in London for 2 weeks for investor meetings. After that, we go back to San Francisco. You can join us there when you're ready. They deplaned together, moving through customs as a unit. Oliver was awake now, but calm, looking around with wide, curious eyes. Maya kept him content while Ethan handled their passports and declarations. In the arrivals hall, a driver was waiting with a sign that read, Ward. Ethan introduced Maya to him, and the driver took their bags without question, clearly used to his employer's unpredictable arrangements. I have a hotel near Kensington, Ethan said to Maya. Where are you staying? I haven't booked anything yet. I was going to figure it out after we landed. Stay at my hotel. I'll get you a room. No pressure, no expectations. Just stay close. Let us spend these 2 weeks getting to know each other. Let me show you what the job would actually look like. Maya knew she should refuse, should maintain boundaries, keep distance, protect herself. But when she looked at Oliver, reaching his small hands toward her, she couldn't say no. Okay, she agreed. 2 weeks. Trial period. The drive into London was quieter than their Dublin dinner had been, but it was a comfortable silence. Oliver dozed in his car seat between them, occasionally making small sounds that Maya automatically soothed with gentle touches or soft words. Ethan watched these interactions with something like wonder. This morning, he'd been a struggling single father facing 8 hours of potential hell on a plane. Now he had help. Real help. The kind that didn't just take over but taught and supported. At the hotel, a beautiful historic building in Kensington, the staff treated Ethan with the deference wealthy guests received. They secured Maya a room on the same floor, just 3 doors down from Ethan's suite. Tomorrow? Ethan asked as they stood in the hallway, Oliver now sleeping peacefully in his carrier. Tomorrow, Maya confirmed. We'll start figuring out a routine, sleep training, feeding schedules, all of it. Thank you, Maya. For everything. She smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one she'd felt in years. Thank you for giving me a reason to try again. In her room, Maya unpacked her small bag and sat on the bed, her phone in her hands. She pulled up her Photos app and scrolled to a folder she rarely opened. Isaiah's pictures. His face smiled at her from the screen, 7 months old, chubby cheeks, bright eyes, completely unaware of the defect slowly destroying his heart. I miss you, she whispered to the image. Every single day I miss you. But I think I'm ready to try living again, not moving on from you, never that, but living in a way that honors what you taught me about love. She closed the photos and opened her contacts, scrolling to a number she hadn't called in months. Her therapist. Hi, Dr. Patterson, it's Maya Thompson. I know I haven't been in touch for a while, but something happened. Something big, and I think I might finally be ready to really work on healing. Can we schedule a session? The next morning, Maya woke to a text from Ethan. Oliver's up and asking for you, well, crying for you. Come rescue us? She smiled, got dressed, and headed 3 doors down. When Ethan opened the door, Oliver was mid-cry, his face red and scrunched with displeasure. Maya took him from Ethan's arms, and Oliver immediately quieted, his eyes focusing on her face with recognition. Good morning, sweetheart, she said softly. Let's get you sorted out. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine emerged. Maya would arrive at Ethan's suite each morning to help with Oliver's care. She taught Ethan proper bottle techniques, burping methods, sleep training strategies. She showed him how to read Oliver's cues, how to distinguish between different types of cries, how to soothe without panicking. But more than that, they talked. About Isaiah and about Oliver's mother. About grief and fear and the courage it takes to try again after devastating loss. About parenthood and purpose, and finding meaning in unexpected places. They visited London's parks, pushing Oliver in his stroller through Kensington Gardens and along the Thames. They had dinner together most evenings, Oliver sleeping in his carrier while they talked for hours. It wasn't romantic. Not yet, at least. But it was connection. Real, honest connection between 2 damaged people learning to trust again. On their last night in London, as they sat in Ethan's suite watching Oliver sleep peacefully in his travel crib, Ethan turned to Maya with a serious expression. So, what's the verdict? Will you come to San Francisco with us? Maya had spent 2 weeks wrestling with this question. Wrestling with fear and hope, with grief and possibility, with the ghost of Isaiah and the reality of Oliver. She looked at the sleeping baby, this child who'd come into her life at a moment when she'd needed purpose most. She thought about how Oliver reached for her now, how he settled immediately in her arms, how his face lit up when she walked into a room. She thought about Ethan, who'd been a stressed stranger on a plane and was now someone she genuinely cared about. Someone who'd shown her his vulnerabilities and respected hers. Someone who was learning to be a better father, not by being perfect, but by being present. And she thought about Isaiah, about the promise she'd made at his grave to never love again, to never risk her heart again. But Isaiah had taught her to love deeply, completely, without reservation. And honoring his memory didn't mean shutting down her heart. It meant opening it wider, loving more fiercely, living more bravely. Yes, she said finally, tears streaming down her face. I'll come with you, not to replace what I lost, but to build something new. For Oliver, for you, and for me. Ethan's eyes glistened, too. He reached across the small space between them and took her hand, not as a romantic gesture, but as a partner, as a friend, as someone who understood loss and was learning to hope again. Thank you, he whispered, for saving us, both of us. 3 months later, Maya stood in a San Francisco park, pushing Oliver in his stroller while Ethan walked beside her. The baby was 8 months old now, healthy and happy and growing fast. Her apartment in Chicago was packed up. Her belongings moved to a small house near Ethan's place in Pacific Heights. She'd transferred her volunteer commitments to San Francisco organizations and started consulting part-time with Bay Area neonatal units. And every morning she woke up with purpose. Not the desperate, grief-driven purpose of the past 3 years, but real, life-affirming purpose. She hadn't forgotten Isaiah. She never would. His picture sat on her nightstand, and she visited his grave whenever she flew back to Chicago. But now she could look at his photo and smile instead of just crying. She could remember the joy of his 7 months instead of only the devastation of losing him. Oliver started to fuss in his stroller, and Maya stopped to pick him up. He immediately snuggled into her shoulder, content. "You're so good with him," Ethan said, watching with that soft expression he got whenever he saw her with Oliver. "He's easy to love," Maya replied simply. And it was true. Loving Oliver didn't diminish Isaiah's memory. If anything, it honored it. Because Isaiah had taught Maya what it meant to be a mother, and that lesson lived on through every child she helped, every baby she comforted, every parent she taught. As they walked through the park, the San Francisco sun warm on their faces, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the absence of grief, that would always be part of her. But peace alongside the grief. Room for both loss and love, for memory and new beginnings, for honoring the past while embracing the future. Oliver reached up and grabbed her necklace, a small pendant with Isaiah's name engraved on it. She'd worn it every day since his funeral. "Gentle, sweetheart," she said softly, loosening his grip. Ethan noticed the necklace, really noticed it for the first time. "Isaiah?" "Yeah, I wear it every day, so he's always with me. Do you think he'd approve of this? Of us?" Maya looked down at Oliver, then at Ethan, then up at the blue sky above them. "I think he'd be happy that his mama learned to live again, that she found a way to turn pain into purpose, that she's helping another little boy have the life he didn't get to have." "That's beautiful," Ethan said quietly. They continued walking, a small family unit that didn't look like anyone's expected definition of family. Not a traditional mother and father, not a conventional arrangement, but a family nonetheless. Bound by love, by healing, by the courage to try again after loss. And somewhere, Maya liked to think Isaiah was watching, not with sadness but with pride, because his mama had found her way back to life, and that was the greatest tribute she could offer him. When grief has consumed you for so long, how do you know when it's finally time to let yourself live again? If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of redemption, courage, and unexpected second chances.